More on this now from Fabrizio Poli. He's an aviation analyst and entrepreneur and joins me now live from Manchester in the United Kingdom. Thank you for joining us on the program. You know, this is the third time that we've seen a Pegasus Airlines plane skid off the runway in Turkey since 2018. The crash here in Istanbul on Wednesday comes almost exactly 1 month after a similar incident in January, and 2 years ago, a flight skidded off the runway in Trabzon. All of these incidents involved Boeing 737-800 jets, but the crash in Istanbul on Wednesday was the only incident that involved fatalities. Do you see similarities here in all three of these incidents?
Well, first of all, let's just defy the myth here that people think that the Boeing 737 is a dangerous airplane. I personally have flown over 5,000 hours as a pilot on the 737-800. It's a very safe airplane, and I know Boeing is getting a bad rap right now for the 737 MAX, but that's a story for another day. If we look at these three accidents, obviously 3 accidents, same airline, same type of airplane, there's obviously something wrong with the training. Because, you know, if you're having 3 accidents, you know, in a short space of time, there's something wrong with the training. But as I always say, you know, accidents happen for a number of reasons. There's a Swiss cheese model, which says that, you know, it's usually after a number of events line up. And here, what do we know? We know that there was a tailwind. The pilots landed with a 19-knot tailwind. That's not a good thing to do. We also know there was a storm near the airport, which is why the wind was behaving the way it was behaving. We also know that the control tower was speaking to another aircraft, telling them there was going to be a runway change. So basically, this was going to be the last landing, and then they were going to switch the runway around because of the wind. What I think happened is the pilots came in and performed what's called an unstable approach. So the aircraft was not stable. That's why they came in, they landed long, and they went off the runway. Now, the question that needs to be answered is, why did they come in and fly an unstable approach? Now, they could have been low on fuel. And so my question would be, well, why were they low on fuel? They knew when they left that they were going into an airport where storms were around the airport, so they should have been carrying more fuel. But that could be the company policy. They don't want them to carry too much fuel. Some airlines are like this. Were the pilots fatigued? Had they been flying a lot over the last 7 days? And the airline pushing them to fly more? This is another question that needs to be answered. So the accidents never happen for one reason, but certainly looking at the fact that this airline had 3 accidents in a short period of time, there's something wrong with the training and probably the company culture and around the pilots and that needs to be investigated carefully and changed.
It certainly is terrible to have incidents like this happen, and especially when there are fatalities involved. But again, it is very rare, which is, of course, why it makes the news. But what are some things that we can learn then? You said that there is probably a problem with the training. So then what can we learn from these accidents?
Well, first of all, unstable approaches cause over 66% of accidents. When they've analyzed accidents, and Flight Safety Foundation did this, they noticed that a lot of these accidents happen during this phase of flight. So what the airline needs to do is have a stabilization criteria, which means 1,000 feet. If there are instrument meteorological conditions, if the aircraft is not stable, so, you know, set speed, the checklist completely out the way, the landing gear down, all the flaps out for landing and that. If the aircraft hasn't got those parameters in place at 1,000 feet, when they're in instrument meteorological conditions, then the aircraft has to basically abort the landing. So go around and don't land and go up and try again, or go into the hold and wait for the weather to improve. So that's one thing that needs to happen. This stabilization criteria goes down to 500 feet when the weather's good and you're in visual meteorological conditions. So that's one thing, and that really is down to the airline to train the pilots in that way. Fuel policy is another thing. I don't know what the fuel policy is of Pegasus Airlines, but, you know, some airlines do, you know, push their pilots to not carry too much fuel, because fuel equals weight, weight equals more fuel burn, which equals money. So, but that, you know, is down to the airline policy, but also down to the captain to decide. The captain will look at the weather, discuss things with the first officer, look at the payload, and then decide how much fuel to carry. And you should always carry a bit more fuel, as they say. I'm carrying a few extra 500 kilos for my grandma. That's one term us pilots use. So, you know, these are all things that need to be looked at. But certainly the training and the company culture towards the pilots and everything needs to be looked at carefully, and things need to be changed in that arena, because that's certainly a flag that I can see, having seen 3 of these aircraft crash just recently.
All right. Thank you. Some great insight there, Fabrizio Poli, joining us from Manchester in the United Kingdom.